Today I was going to go into Lamentations. I wanted to kind of finish up all the poetry books, then go through the major and the minor prophets, then into the New Testament. Lamentations is a little bit more like Psalms. It has a lot of figurativisms in it, a lot of things that are telling stories and words that are put together to create a mood and create a feel. I actually read all 5 chapters, not in one sitting. It's a little hard to get through in one sitting. It's so much here. It's like eating bread, that really fine bread that has a lot of different fibers and nutrients. And, it's the thicker, coarser bread that takes a while to digest. There's a lot of deep feelings in here also. And if you really take it slow and go through it, the sense is that Jeremiah is lamenting what God had to do to Jerusalem. Not that he would wanted to. There's a scripture in here that God said that for Jeremiah says in chapter 3, for he doth not afflict willingly nor grieve the children of men. This wasn't his will, but because of justice, because of what he said he would do to the nation if it did this, and even to this extent, he even warned them that they would go into captivity, and that was instead of destruction. The other nations got destruction for doing even less what Israel was doing. And Israel kept poking the bear, kept provoking him to anger continually. We saw that through the history. I think the poetry books make a lot of sense, and so do the prophets, once you've gone through the history. Once you've seen what God did, how he was compassionate, and they kept throwing it back into his face, and he would send them prophets, and they were compassionate. He would give them victories, and he would be compassionate. And then later on, we have full-born anger, full-born wrath, full-born. He is now the adversary of his beloved, but not forever. He still has made a promise. Though he will break this down to the smallest of groups, leave a small remnant, a root in the stump of Jesse, so to speak, that there will out of this come arise, of course, the nation of Israel that Jesus knew, and that was taken down in 70 AD with Titus Vespasian, and now that trickles through to today, and it's coming back up again. The Israel that we have today is not the Israel here. It's a government, it is a people, it's an ethnic group, but it's not a culture like this. It's not a religion like this. It's a religion based on old traditions. It's not really strongly put up in front of the nations as we are a temple worshiping, Yahweh worshiping people. So we see Lamentations as how doth the city sit solitary, and there that was full of people. How has she now become a widow? She has that was great among the nations, and the princess among the provinces. How has she become a tributary? The idea of the strength and the power when we look again at what it was in the time of Solomon, and then back and forth as it went through Joash, and later on with Josiah, and later on with Hezekiah, men who tried to make it strong. She wept sorely in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Among all of her lovers, she hath none to comfort her. All of her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. The idea, we spend a lot of time here on like a woman weeping as she has been totally rejected, but this is by her lovers. When you read Jeremiah, this is a little out of context here, that again, there's a part in Jeremiah that talks about Israel in her beauty and how God took her and made her beautiful and filled her with riches and filled her with glory and made her beautiful. Then she gave herself like a prostitute to the nations, and she prostituted herself terribly, even to the point to where she would open her. He says that you open your legs, you open your feet for everybody. I mean, he gives horrible figurativisms that I'll go into when I get to Jeremiah about how even just being a stupid, and I'll say stupid whore, because God has that. But yes, I will forgive you and take you back because of the promise I made to me, because of the promise I made to Abraham, because of the promise I made to David. I will not break that promise. And so this whole lamenting is this woman has now been cast out by her lovers that she chose over Jehovah, over him, over his temple, over his goodness, that that he kept reminding her of what happened in the Red Sea and what happened with Moses and what happened with Joshua and what happened with the judges and what happened with the kings. And here he was giving them victories over their enemies, that they were overwhelmed at times, and yet God was the one who gave the victories. We go through this, and Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of the great servitude. She is defiled among the heathen. She finds no rest. All of her persecutors overtook her between the straits, that she was like a woman chased down in the streets and taken away. And so the ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to her solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. We spend lamentation. This isn't just, of course, Jeremiah lamenting, but it's also God lamenting. I didn't choose for it to be this way. This was not the way I wanted to do. I warned you. If we look back at the book of Moses, we see where he warned them. If you remember, I think it was in Deuteronomy, where he told them how good it would be and how he would take care of them in the land, and how they'd have no enemies, and they'd have plenty, and they'd have plenty of animals, and they would have health, and they would have children, and they would have wonderful of the land. It was a land of milk and honey. But if you go against me, I will become your enemy, and you'll lose this, and you'll lose that, and I'll take away this, and you'll live by the sword, and you'll have pestilence. And even Solomon tried to save the day by saying, if you remember what he said about, if anyone prays to this temple, if anyone turns to this temple and says, please forgive us, they got so bad that no one was standing. And so it was wiped out, and it was gone. And so her adversaries are chiefs, her enemies proper, for the Lord has afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. This didn't happen by accident. Her transgressions, she did nothing about it and didn't care. And among the daughters of Zion, all her beauty is departed. Jerusalem remembered in the days of her affliction and of her miseries all her pleasant things that she had had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hands of the enemy, and none did help her. The adversary saw her and did mock. Her adversary saw her and mocked. You don't have any strength. You've turned away from your strength. Jerusalem has grievously sinned. And again, we saw where all of Chronicles was about Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was the head. And at a time what Jerusalem did, so went Israel. And Jerusalem could lean the nation towards God. But it was Jerusalem also at the time also of Manasseh that pulled them away. Now, the people were willing to go. You didn't have to chase them with sticks. When the king allowed them to have sin, they ran after it. Think about Aaron. As soon as Moses was gone for a while, they made a Baal, they made a calf to worship, and they went to play. It didn't take them long. And so Jerusalem is here. Your filthiness is in your skirts. She remembered not her last end, therefore she came down wonderfully. She has no comforter. The adversary has spread out his hand among all the pleasant things. She has been among the heathen, entering through the sanctuary. All the people sigh. They give bread. They have given their pleasant things for me to relieve the soul. O Lord, and consider, for I am become vile. And when this I here is really, in a sense, you'll see this I come across as the man personifying that I am Jerusalem. So he's speaking as if he is Jerusalem. And so I have become vile. Is it nothing for you, all that you pass by? Behold and see, if there is any sorrow like unto my sorrow, there is none unto me. Wherefore the Lord has afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. That we were not afraid. You saw what he did in anger to the nations around you. You saw what he told you to do to the nations that were around you. And yet what happened was, he won't turn that on us. He said he would. That's the problem here. He said he would, and you thought he was lying. You thought he was just blowing smoke. But he wasn't lying. The yoke of my transgressions is bound up by his hand. They are wretched and come upon my neck. He has made my strength to fail. The Lord has delivered me into the hands upon whom I am not able to rise. The Lord has done this. This is not happening by accident, he says. For these things I weep, mine eyes runneth down like water, because the Comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. My children are desolate because the enemy has prevailed. Who is the comforter that was supposed to be there? It was the Lord himself. Zion has spread forth her hands, and there is none to comfort her. The Lord has commanded concerning Judah that his adversaries should be round about him. Jerusalem is a menstrual woman among them. Listen to that wording. You are a menstrual woman. You are this dirty, polluted woman among them. This is horrible figurativism to make us feel and see and just kind of sit. It was, like I said, very hard to read through this casually. You can't do it after you get trained in the poetry. You just can't read this like a text. You can't read this like a treatise. You can't treat this like just a textbook of some kind. To feel what he's feeling, to feel the anger and the pain and the hurt. The Lord is righteous, for I have rebelled against his commandment. I pray you, all people, behold my sorrow. My virgins and my young men are gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, and they deceived me. My priests and my elders gave up the ghost in the city. Behold, O Lord, I am in distress. My bowels are troubled. My heart is turned within me. They have heard my sigh. There is none to comfort me. Let all their wickedness come before thee, and do unto them as they have done unto me. For all my transgressions, for my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. Yes, the heart of the city is faint. God has turned against them. Now, God does judge the nations for how harshly they treat this woman. They were not to treat her as harshly as they did, but his anger comes down. You'll see that in the burden of this and the doom of this person, and I have this against this nation. He does come across the nations. He's going to hold these nations accountable for how they treated this wife of Jehovah. But yet, he is being the enemy here. Now hath the Lord covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud of anger. You are just immersed in this. You were in the cloud of his love, and you were protected. You were given light by fire at night. You were given a cloud of comfort, of knowing the presence of God by day. And what happens now? That's become anger. The Lord has swallowed up all the habitation of Jacob, and hath not pitied. This is interesting. We see several places. He tells them, go in and don't have pity. Don't have pity for the young. Don't have pity for the old. Don't have pity for the animals in certain circumstances. You go in and wipe them like a dish. That's what God is doing here, and he's not pitying. The sinful man and even atheists today think God will pity. God will pity me. God will pity our nation. God will look down and see all the children. God will look down and see all the people. He will pity us. Therefore, we can sin all we want because we don't live in the love of God. We live in the pity of God. And they're going to be found out. No, he will not. He will clean the dish. Now, those that are innocent among that get wiped up, they will go to be with God because he's that kind of person. And the evil will be torn away. But we need to realize he wants to lift up, but he will tear down. He has cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He has drawn back his right hand from before the enemy. He has burned against Jacob like a flaming fire. He hath bent his bow like an enemy. He stood by this right hand as an adversary. He stood as an adversary with his strong right hand against us. Against them, I should say. And he bent his bow like an enemy. He stood with his right hand. The Lord was as an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all the palaces. He had destroyed the host. He has taken violently and taken away his tabernacle. See, this is where he put his name. See, again, I'm going a little fast through this, but when you stop and say, I put my name there, now I'm taking my name away, and I'm going against my own tabernacle. That's how bad God will judge for sin, and we see him doing this. We really need to read this and understand that that's what he's doing. The Lord has cast off his altar. My gosh. The place where you would go to find relief, to find help, to find closeness, he is casting off. The Lord has purposed to destroy all the walls of the daughter of Zion. He has stretched out a line. He has not drawn back his hand from destroying. Wherefore he made the rampart and the wall of lament. They languished together. He made the rampart. He made his way up over the wall. This is what God did. The elders of the daughter of Zion sit among the ground, and they are in silence. They cast up dust on their heads. Mine eyes do fall with tears, my bowels are troubled, my liver is poured upon the earth for the destruction of the daughter. They said to their mothers, where is the corn? This is children. And the children swoon. And what shall I say to witness for thee these things that I liken to, O daughter of Jerusalem? What shall I equal thee, that I might comfort thee, O virgin daughter of Zion? For the breach is great like the sea. Who can hear it? It's the idea of the sea coming in and breaching the wall, and it's just flooding in. All this wrath is just flooding in. The prophets have seen vain and foolish things, and they have not discovered thy iniquity, to turn away thy captivity, but have seen of thee false burdens and causes of banishment. They had false prophets, prophets that told them this will be okay, prophets that told them you're in the right, prophets that told them he's on your side. And they were false prophets. All that pass will clap their hands at thee. They will hiss and has their head at the and wag their head at the daughter of Zion, saying, is this the city that men call perfection and beauty, the joy of the whole earth? Wow. The men know what Jerusalem was, and now they're seeing what it's become. My enemies have opened their mouth against thee. They hiss and gnash their teeth. The Lord has done that which he hath devised. He devised this. This wasn't an accident. He didn't look down and see, oh, these people are coming against Jerusalem. Oh, I didn't see that coming. He built up Babylon for the purpose of judging Judah. We have to remember that. He is a part of this game. He hath thrown down and hath not pitied. He has caused thine enemy to rejoice over thee. Their heart cried unto the Lord, O wall of Jerusalem, the tears run down like rivers day and night. Give thyself no rest. And cry out in the night, in the beginning of the watches. Pour out thy heart. Lift up thy hands towards him for the life of the young children that faint in hunger. Lift up your hands for him to the children that are fainting in hunger. See, we tend to think also God will come in and he will, oh, well, I'm not going to allow this to happen. I'm not going to allow these people to be hurt. I'm going to let you do what you want. It's just the opposite. Those hungry kids are because there's a sin of the people. Those starving women are the sins of the people. The older people that are dying and all these problems and this darkness and this banishment was because of the sins of the people. All we have to do is take care of the sin issue and the light comes on and the goodness of God flows. But after a while, he owes it to himself. He said, I will judge sin. And we think that he will ignore sin. He has said, and if he said it, he's going to do it. Arise and cry in the night. Behold the Lord, and consider to whom thou hast done this. Shall the woman eat the fruit, and the children as a span long? Shall the prayer and the priest and the prophet be slain in the sanctuary? The young and the old lie on the ground in the streets. My virgins and young men have fallen by the sword. Thou hast slain them in the day of thine anger. Thou hast killed and not pitied. Thou hast called as a solemn assembly. My terrors are round about, so that in the day of the Lord's anger none escaped or remained, though that I had swaddled and brought us. Let me read that again. The Lord's anger is, let me read the whole verse here. Thou hast called as in a solemn day my terrors round about, so that in the day of the Lord's anger none escaped nor remained. Those that I have swaddled and brought us have been mine enemy consumed. That one's really kind of wordy there. But the idea is that the prophet swaddled the people and was taking care of the people. But this is like God calls a solemn day, but not a solemn day for feasting, but a day of wrath. And he's doing the same thing, just like he calls a solemn day, a Sabbath day, a day of rejoicing. He now calls this for a day of wrath. It's the same thing. He's just calling one as the other. So that the day of the Lord's anger, none escaped or remained. We see that God will not be mocked. He will come in. Again, the deep feeling we have here, I don't think people sorrow anymore about sin. We wag our tails against it and we say how horrible it is. But we don't feel the depth that God feels about this, and that he does not want to come out after us. When you see what happens in the book of Revelation here at the end, It's not his will, but it's his purpose. That's where we get two things mixed up. The purpose of God is that he will be holy and be seen as holy and be worshipped as God. But the will of God is that he will do this. But sometimes the will of God is that he will to bring down his enemies so that he might be just. We have this old love God thing. He's the love God. That wasn't written till like 30 years after Christ died. He was seen as the just God from the time of Abraham. Even Abraham said, "Will not the God of the universe do what is right?" He didn't appeal to his emotions. He appealed to his sense of justice. And when we come to God through Christ, it's because of the sense of justice. Here, justice is happening. Justice for God. It wasn't his will to do it, but he set it up. If that's what you want, I will have justice. So we need to be very afraid and realize that Christianity is not based upon the love God as much as it's based upon the just God. The nations need to know that. We need to remember that, because the gospel is about the justice of God on a cross, not the love of God.